Hello and welcome to Around the Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. We've got a great show for you today. We've got a lot of different topics. We're actually going to start a little bit with the unemployment insurance. I just want to give you a little, sort of a brief rundown on what we're going to do today here on the show, and then we'll dive right into it. We're going to give you a little bit of Fukushima news. Things are still going pretty bad over there, so I'm going to get into that. We've got the story of a strange story of a guy who got tased in the eye. That should be fun. A story of police brutality. That's pretty terrible. And later on, Dennis Rodman becomes unhinged on CNN. Unhinged. that should be a lot of fun. But before I get into that, I just want to say thank you guys for watching these videos. Make sure to join us on the live stream every day here on TYT Nation from 5 to 6 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. And, of course, catch me and others on the panel show TYT Community, and that is on Thursdays and Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 9 to 10. Make sure to catch it. A lot of good stuff happening there. So, and before I get started, I'm going to get into my Patreon campaign. Still have 2 patrons, people that support the show. That's what a patron is. You give a monthly donation of $1, $3, $5, $5, $10, whatever you want to give, and that helps goes to support the show, and it goes to getting better equipment and basically helping me pay the bills. So, and to keep this show going, so I don't have to try and run out and get a corporate sponsor, which I won't do. So, I would rather trash the show, get rid of it completely, and work somewhere else than get a corporate sponsor. So, I'm just letting you know that. I will not take corporate money. So, with that said, let's go ahead and start with the first story. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now, Congress just recently got together and decided to pass the extension to unemployment benefits. That just happened earlier today. It managed to squeak through the Senate, barely beating a filibuster. It passed through the Senate with a vote of 60 to 37. The Democrats managed to get some Republicans to cross over and vote for this. Now, who are some of these Republicans? Well, there is Kelly Ayotte from New Hampshire, Dan Coates of Indiana, Susan Collins of Maine, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and finally Rob Portman of Ohio. Now, Rob Portman's kind of an interesting addition because he doesn't actually care about extending unemployment benefits. He just says he wants to extend the discussion, the debate. Well, what's the debate? We still have pretty high unemployment. It has been going down, but I think as anybody really knows who looks into the numbers, that doesn't count the people who have who's basically stopped looking because they couldn't find work. Now, there's a lot of people like that out there. So, and if we really took those into consideration, unemployment would be about 16% or higher. So, definitely something worth mentioning. Now, let me see. Now, of course, those who are against the bill, of course, are Republicans like Mitch McConnell, and, of course, all the conservative think tanks, including the Club for Growth. Now, the Club for Growth, before this vote was held, of course, they urged all senators to say no. And they said, well, we'll only do it, we'll only support this if we cut spending somewhere else. They said, quote, Congress should end the federal unemployment insurance program and return the authority back to the states, which already have programs into place. Now, they say that they don't want it approved because of the lack of spending cuts, obviously, to offset it. But you know these conservative groups just want to get rid of the federal unemployment program. Of course. Is that saves them lots and lots of, well, I don't know if it really saves them all that much money, to be honest with you, but and they continued, absent this, Congress should pay for this extension by cutting spending elsewhere in the budget. After 6 years, an extension can no longer be called an emergency with any credibility. There's plenty of waste in the federal budget from which to find an offset. Now, on that note, I 100% agree. I 100% agree with that because you know what? You can find a lot of waste in the budget. Of course, some of that, they might not be happy. One man's waste is, I guess, another man's subsidy. I want to get into that later, but first, I just want to say that the bill, of course, is still heading over to the House, which means it's got John Boehner and the Republican-controlled House to deal with. Now, you know how they're really a house of obstruction, so who knows if we're actually going to have a deal to extend these unemployment benefits. But the chief argument that they use, and you love this, The chief argument that they use against any sort of welfare program is that, well, it disincentivizes you to find a job. No, not really. I mean, in some people, sure. But for most people, jobs are difficult to come by. They're difficult to find, even after the so-called recession is over. Now, remember, our recession is the second worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. It was literally that bad. And the recovery has not been so great. Now, it's been great for the 1%. It's been awesome. Remember, 93, what is it, 90, over 90% of the gains went to the top 1%. Actually, one year, over 100% of the gains went to the 1%. And everyone else lost net worth. So you can't really call this a recovery. And that's why these programs are necessary. That's why these programs are absolutely needed. And that's why it makes sense to extend it. Now, like I said, a lot of Republicans are against extending these benefits because they see it as like a safety hammock. For example, Rand Paul. Rand Paul, of course, says that this is more of a safety hammock, and a lot of these Republicans will say that. But you know where I'm sorry, hold on. I'm a little sidetracked. I'm a little out of order today. Just a little out of order. So when Republicans say that they want to do an offset, I'm fine with that. Because like I mentioned before, there's a lot of waste in the budget. For example, you've got offshore tax havens. They're not illegal, but they're not exactly right either. It's basically where they keep their money in offshore tax havens. These American companies, or, well, they're not American anymore, but multinational corporations that do business in America that have benefited from American infrastructure are literally parking their money overseas so they don't have to pay taxes. Do you know how much that costs? That costs $150 billion a year. You know what the unemployment extension will cost for a year? About $26 billion. Where else can you find some savings in the budget? Well, how about you stop giving oil companies $4 billion a year in subsidies? Now that makes sense. You could definitely get that money and use that for infrastructure, or use it to partly pay for this unemployment extension to help people barely hang on, because that's what they're doing. See, what a lot of these conservatives don't understand is that this money goes right back into the economy. It gets spent immediately. This is about the only thing that people have to hang on with. They're literally hanging by a thread, and this is about this and some of the other programs like food stamps, like SNAP, that have been targeted. These are the only things that are keeping these people hanging on. And Republicans have been more than eager to cut it, saying that they're, they're wasteful programs, and they create and foster dependency on government. No, they don't. The reason that so many people are still on these, and the reason that so many people still need these unemployment benefits, is because there aren't enough jobs. Remember, there are 3 job seekers for every 1 open job. And that's really a conservative estimate. In some places, there are more. And in some places are having a boom with some of the fracking jobs and whatnot. But it all depends on where you're at. Most of the country, they can't find decent jobs. And a lot of people have resorted to taking 2, maybe 3 low-wage jobs to make up for it. So, I mean, it's not that the American people are lazy, like people like Rand Paul and George Will like to say. It's because it's still hard out there. It's still incredibly difficult, and that's why these programs are incredibly important to keep around. And one more point that I wanted to say is that we spend $93 billion on corporate welfare a year. That's a year. And they're saying that they can't find $26 billion in the budget. There you go. You can pay for it right there by taking away that corporate welfare and actually giving it to people who will spend it, who will use it, and the economy will benefit from it, from that reinvestment into the economy. Like I said, they're going to spend it. If you cut that aid off now, that's going to further slow the growth of the overall economy. And that's not good and when we're in such a bad, poor recovery. So, hopefully, the House decides to do their jobs and pass this thing, get this thing through so that these people can actually get the help that they need to survive. Moving on. Yesterday I promised to do a story on Fukushima, and it's pretty disastrous. Now everybody knows for the last few years that Fukushima has been an absolute disaster, and things are still going wrong there. Now there've been a lot of reports there've been a lot of recent reports out about how a lot of the engineers and people who are fixing or trying to clean up the area in Fukushima and just prevent the core from melting down even further have been dumping, toxic wastewater into the ocean. Not only that, but there's been storage tank leaks that have been leaking into the groundwater. Now, this particular story actually comes from a worker who had actually worked on some of these storage tanks. A little bit of insider information from a former employee. Now, this employee was named, and forgive me if I butcher it, Yoshitatsu Uichi. Now, he is an auto mechanic and tour bus driver. Now, he worked at Fukushima between July 2nd and December 6th of 2012. Now, he talked to the paper Asahi Shimbun. And once again, I'm sorry for any viewers that know Japanese. I apologize for butchering the names. I do not know Japanese. Now, Uichi, he was one of 17 workers that was actually sent from Okinawa to actually work on the storage tanks at Fukushima. Now, these storage tanks, of course, were to store this contaminated water so it didn't get into the groundwater, didn't get into the ground, or have to get dumped back into the ocean, which a lot of it eventually did. I think it was over 300 million gallons of just toxic, contaminated, radioactive water getting dumped into the ocean. It's kind of a bad thing. Now, these storage tanks, according to Uichi, were actually held together with very cheap materials. Now, his task was to cover 5 of these storage tanks with lids. Okay, well, what kind of lids? Well, they were supposed to be steel lids, and according to Uichi, he said that his instructions were to only use 4 bolts. But the lids had 8 bolt holes. Okay, so you're not exactly sealing this thing to the best of your ability. And that's definitely trying to cut costs. Now, I think you can get away with some of that for lids. Okay. But there are other things that they can't really get away with. And I'll get into that. Now, what did Uichi have to think about this? Well, he said, quote, "I couldn't believe that such slipshod work was being done, even if it was part of stopgap measures." Absolutely. Now, some of the other things that he had pointed out is that wire nets were used instead of reinforcing bars. So instead of using bars to help construct these storage tanks, they used wire nets. Wire nets. Not only that, but instead of using a sealing agent on these cylindrical tanks, they used waterproof sheets on the inside. Waterproof sheets. Is it any surprise that any of this stuff was found to be leaking? Is that any surprise that so many of these storage tanks are now leaking the radioactive water into the ground? Not at all. Look, Fukushima has been a disaster. I mean, obviously it was a disaster when it happened, but it's still a disaster because of the ineptness of first TEPCO, who owned the plant, and now the Japanese government that nationalized the plant. There have been fuck-ups on every count. First of all, with the design and the placement of the generators during the hurricane and the tsunami. Now, I'm sorry, earthquake and tsunami. During the earthquake and the tsunami. That's a fuck-up right there. Sure, nobody expects to get slammed with both an earthquake and a tsunami at the same time, but you really kind of have to plan for things a little bit better. Plan for basically the unthinkable, just in case, because things do happen, and Fukushima should be a teachable moment to say that, hey, it may be improbable, but it does happen. Stuff like that does happen. It's storing the generators in the basement, so they'd immediately get flooded out, and then, boom, you've got a meltdown. Along with TEPCO's ineptness and the Japanese government's ineptness at handling this thing, you've also had a lot of violations, like safety violations, especially in stuff like this, trying to construct the storage tanks out of cheap materials. Now, a researcher named Christina Consolo, she hosts a radio show called Newt Radio. She says, quote, "The site has been propped up with duct tape and a kickstand for over 2 years. Many of their fixes are only temporary, as there are so many issues to address. And cost always seems to be an enormous factor in what gets implemented and what doesn't." And there you really have it. It's cost. No, it costs too much to fix this stuff, well enough to hold this contaminated water. It costs too much. I don't want to spend that kind of money. And there have been other reports, of course, of homeless people being hired at less than minimum wage through criminal gangs to work at Fukushima. Oh, for Christ's sakes. If that's not exploiting the homeless to save a few bucks, I don't know what is. So they try to do these cheap fixes to save a few bucks. And cheap labor, going through many subsidiaries, of course, in order to, hide any or protect yourself from any wrongdoing, and employing gangs to go and round up homeless people to work for less than minimum wage at your plant. Why is this not a bigger story? Why isn't a lot of the Western media, the other media, covering this stuff? I feel like there's not a lot of television outlets, especially, that are covering what's going on at Fukushima. Now, I could be wrong. I don't have all day to sit there and watch TV. So I could be wrong. But this should be a bigger story. This should be a much, much bigger story than it is. And I'm not sure why it isn't. There's also other parts of where the Japanese government has signed in new restrictions on speech to try and silence people from talking about how bad the Fukushima disaster is. That's pretty bad. That's really, really bad. And that's really dangerous, because it's really important to know what kind of damage and what kind of danger regular people will face from this disaster, because this disaster is not over. This is an ongoing disaster. This is an ongoing problem, and it will continue to be an ongoing problem. Radiation doesn't just go away. It stays for hundreds of years. And so the least the Japanese government could do is try to humor us and actually give us the real information and try to tell us, hey, yeah, this is what's really happening. We fucked up in about 100 different ways, but really, guys, we're working on it. We're doing better. Trust me. I would like to see them actually start to do better, because I think that it's the right thing to do. Story gets me mad. The story gets me really mad, and it should get everybody mad. All right, I'm gonna take a quick break here. I'll be back. Got more stories. See you in a minute. All right. Welcome back to Around the Nation. Just noticed that I'm having a couple of frame rate issues, some stream issues. So if I've got some lag going on, I apologize. That's why I'm doing the Patreon campaign, so I can afford to take care of these issues. And that's one of the things that's definitely on my to-do list. Get some better equipment so I stop having so many frame issues with my streaming. So with that said, I want to continue on with the show and do the best with what I have. Okay. An Orlando man named Travis James Rodriguez had a strange injury happen to him during a confrontation with police in front of a One-Eyed Jack's sports bar. Now get this. Rodriguez was apparently... Hold on. So Rodriguez was apparently shot in the eye with a taser by a local police officer named Jason Portilla. Now, why was he? Why did he get in trouble? Why did he get shot with a stun gun? With a taser. Well, apparently Rodriguez had a weapon on him, and he had removed his weapon from the waistband of his pants and was actually holding it up at chest level. Now, that action, of course, prompted the officer to draw and fire his stun gun. Now, how it got into Rodriguez's eye, well, the police officer report said, as a result of Rodriguez turning his body, one of the taser prongs struck Rodriguez in the right eye. Ouch. Look, that's gotta hurt. I don't care who you are or how drunk you may be. I don't know if alcohol really played a big role in this, but it seems likely. Remember, this was at a sports bar, ironically named One-Eyed Jack's. Now, I'm actually surprised. I'm actually kind of glad that this happened. Why? Well, this guy, Rodriguez, could have easily been shot and killed by this officer. Now, normally you hear a story about a police officer and a civilian that has a gun, and usually the civilian ends up dead. Not a good ending. Well, this time, thankfully, he didn't get shot. Interesting. Now, like I said, you hear so many stories about how police overreact in these situations. Now, I'm actually glad, especially in a place like Florida. Now, Florida is the state where everybody seems to be shooting each other. So it's actually refreshing to get a story out of Florida that doesn't involve somebody being dead. Now, of course, Rodriguez doesn't exactly seem like the nicest guy, and he was admitted later to the Orlando Regional Medical Center for treatment. Now, he's charged, of course, with carrying a concealed firearm and resisting arrest. Now, the funny thing about this guy is that he also gave the police a false address and couldn't be reached for comment. So he wasn't really a nice guy to begin with, but hats off to Jason Portilla, Officer Jason Portilla, for actually not killing him. It seems amazing, but here in America, we have to actually praise cops when they don't kill someone. That's kind of how bad it's gotten. That I'm actually like, oh my God, oh thanks God, he didn't kill the guy. Yes. It's sad. But this is, surprisingly enough, this is sort of a feel-good story. The next one, not so much of a feel-good story. And once I get into it, you will know why. You will understand why. A North Carolina detective is on leave after fatally shooting a mentally ill teen. Now, the mentally ill teen, of course, was named... Hold on. What was his name anyway? Keith Vidal. Sorry. This mentally ill teen was 18-year-old Keith Vidal. Now, Keith Vidal had schizophrenia, and so his parents called the police in order to... Hold on. I did this whole thing with the wrong sidebar. I apologize. Let me just start this over again. Clean. All right. So a North Carolina detective is on leave after fatally shooting a mentally ill teen named Keith Vidal. Now, Keith Vidal is an 18-year-old, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, this teen was under a schizophrenic episode when he apparently picked up a screwdriver and didn't actually hurt anybody with it, but it was threatening enough for the parents to call the police. Now, a couple of officers had already come to the situation and had come to respond to the situation and had successfully subdued the teenager with a stun gun. Now, that should be enough, right? Well, apparently, this Brunswick County officer, this North Carolina detective, pulled up late to the scene, even after the officers who had already these officers that had responded to the scene first, had successfully subdued the teenager. And he decided, no, I'm still going to rush to the scene. And he's reported of saying, quote, "We don't have time for this." And that's when he allegedly shot the teenager and killed him. Now, I'm sorry. This story gets to me already. This story pisses me off, and it's obvious why. Now, Mark Wilsey, the teen's father, he had explained that they called the police to help get the son under control during a schizophrenic episode. Now, the officers, like I mentioned before, they successfully subdued him with a taser. But then this other guy runs in and shoots the kid for no reason. Wilsey said, quote, "They killed my son in cold blood. We called for help, and they killed my son." Now, that's really powerful. And that's really horrifying. But how many stories have came out lately, where the exact same thing happens? I recall another story, probably a couple of months ago, where a teen had stolen their father's truck and drove it down the street. Parent called the police. The police responded with deadly force when the teenager wouldn't get out of the car. So many stories. And that's just one of them. I know there are many more. We have a problem with basically overreaction. Police overreaction. Especially when it comes to mental health. People that are mentally ill and can't get the help that they need and are often very, very difficult for family members to deal with. Especially when a lot of people can't afford to get the proper type of mental health that these people need. And there are no, federal mental health facilities that people can go to get help. And oftentimes, these people a lot of these mentally ill people end up going to prison or getting killed or ending up homeless. We have a huge problem with mental health in this country. And combine that with police overreaction, and it's a deadly mix, especially in circumstances like these. It's incredibly sad. The teenager, he had a screwdriver. A screwdriver versus a gun. Guess what won? And look, it was a small screwdriver even. But they killed him. Did you know he was only 90 pounds? This 18-year-old was only 90 pounds. And he was held down by 2 police officers when he was shot. Yeah, I wonder what's going to happen to the police officer. Well, according to the Brunswick County DA's office, they said that it would take time to determine if a crime had been committed. If a crime had committed. Now, do you get that? This kid is shot dead for having a schizophrenic episode that he could not control. If a crime has been committed. There has been a crime, all right. This kind of police brutality and this unwillingness to understand mental illness and be prepared to deal with mental illness. Now, the cops that first responded that had subdued this teenager with a taser, I don't have any problem with those guys. But it was the guy who allegedly shot this teenager to death. I have no reason not to believe that this is what happened, that the father's account is correct. Why would you lie about something like that? It's really, really horrifying, you know? It's horrifying, and I really hope that his father and his parents, his family, gets justice. Now, we know that in a lot of circumstances, police will cover for each other. You basically cover each other's ass. I hope that doesn't happen in this circumstance. We hope. Now, according to Attorney James Payne, who's representing the officer, he said that when the investigation is done and that review has been completed, everybody will conclude that the officers acted appropriately. Bullshit. Bullshit that the officer acted accordingly. Now, I'm not talking about the ones who had held down the teen. I'm talking about the one who shot the teen to death while being held down over a screwdriver. He was no threat. Like, I understand how weapons can be threatening, okay? And how, yes, if used in the right way, a screwdriver can be harmful. But you have a gun, and you have backup holding that 90-pound kid down. Did you really need to shoot him, to kill him? Is that what policing has come to? And look, I did the prior story about an officer actually using the right amount of force in a situation to contrast this, because I want to make the point that not all police officers are bad. Not all of them are bad. Not all of them are out basically to kill people. Of course not. They're not all bad. They're not all, power hungry people that are basically out to control everything. No. Not all policemen are bad. It's just these ones. This guy. This guy is a bad guy. And this guy, I sincerely hope that this guy gets in trouble and gets what he deserves. Because there is no reason for Keith Vidal to be dead. No reason at all. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to look to see if I can fix these stream issues that keep popping up. Fix the lag. I'll be back in a minute. Thanks for watching. Whoops. All right, sound is back. All right, good. All right. So, Dennis Rodman. Now, Dennis Rodman was on CNN earlier with some of his basketball friends, basically talking from North Korea. Now, Rodman and his friends went to North Korea to play basketball, and they sat down with Chris Cuomo on CNN to basically talk about the trip and why they're there. Now, there was a fellow basketball player that actually said that was talking basically for Rodman and the rest that were really trying to stress that, hey, this trip isn't about politics. We're trying to stay out of that. We're trying to play some basketball. That's all we really want to do here. That's what we care about. We're not going to get into the politics. And repeatedly, he stressed that we're not into the politics. Okay, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about playing basketball. Now, Chris Cuomo had actually continued to bring up Kenneth Bay, and, well, let me just go to the clip and show you what this was about.
I'm not here to fight with you guys. I respect what you're doing. I'm just concerned for the family of this man who is held there, and I am concerned, as many Americans are, about giving a birthday present to a man who is seen as a despot who just had his uncle executed. Dennis, let me end on this. You do have a relationship with this man. You've said it many times. We've seen it demonstrated for whatever reason. Are you going to take an opportunity, if you get it, to speak up for the family of Kenneth Bay and to say, let us know why this man is being held, that this is wrong, that he is sick? If you can help, Dennis, will you take the opportunity?
Watch this. The one thing about politics, Kenneth Bay did one thing. If you understand, I got it.
No, hold on. Let me stop that right there. You notice how he just keeps pushing that. Now, as far as the questions from Chris Cuomo, they're fair. They're very fair. I would be asking the same thing. Hey, you know Kim Jong-un, you're close to him. Why not ask to help get this Kenneth Bay back to America? Now, Kenneth Bay really didn't do a whole lot wrong. As far as I know, he just tried to be a missionary, which is, of course, is absolutely illegal in North Korea, just like anything. Pretty much everything is illegal in North Korea, but nonetheless. So, I would really, if I were Chris Cuomo, I'd be asking the same questions. So I can understand why Rodman was starting to get a little irritated at the end. And it gets better. Check it out.
If you understand what Kenneth Bay did, do you understand what he did?
What did he do? You tell me.
Country.
You tell me. What did he do?
And no. You tell me. You tell me. Why is he held captive?
They haven't released any charges. They haven't released. They haven't released any reason.
Listen. Let me do this. I would love to speak on this.
Go ahead.
You got 10 guys here. 10 guys here that have left their families, left their damn families to help this country as a sports venture. Got 10 guys, all these guys here. Do anyone understand that?
We do, and we appreciate that, and we wish them well with cultural exchange.
No. I'm just saying, no, I don't give a what the, I don't give a rat's ass what the hell you think. I'm saying to you, look at these guys here. Look at them.
Yeah, but Dennis, don't put it on them. Don't use them as an excuse for the behavior that you're putting on yourself.
They came here.
You just basically were saying that Kenneth Bay did something wrong. We don't even know what the charges are. Don't use these guys as a shield for you, Dennis.
Listen. Ain't no shield. I got it. Let me do this. Really, I'm gonna tell you one thing. People around the world, I'm gonna do one thing. You guy behind the mic right now, we are the guys here doing one thing. We have to go back to America and take the abuse. Do you have to take the abuse? Well, we're gonna take it. Do you, sir? Let me know. Are you gonna take that abuse? We're gonna get it. But guess what, though?
Wow. All right. Well, first of all, That's not even the end of it. I'll show you the rest of the clip. But I just have to say, damn, that escalated quickly. Once again, I didn't understand half of what Dennis was saying. Something about like, yeah, we got 10 guys here, and they're coming here to do the cultural exchange or something like that, and just okay, great, yeah. Okay, what about Kenneth Bay, who's actually been sentenced to 15 years of hard labor? Can you at least put in a word? I understand what Chris Cuomo is trying to say, and while I don't agree that he continued to, badger the issue, even though that's not what they were there to talk about, I still agree with the overall point that Chris Cuomo was trying to get Rodman to do. Now, Rodman, and I'm going to get into this later, Rodman, I feel bad for him. But let's just let's go back, watch the last clip, and then I'll tell you why.
One day, this door is going to open because these 10 guys here, all of us, Christy, Ben, Dennis, Charles, all these guys, everybody here, if we could just open the door just a little bit for people to come here and do one thing.
And Dennis makes a great point. There are other Americans here on this trip. You have to understand that we're not alone. We're in passage with about 50 people. There are other Americans that have been to Korea, in and out of Korea. They're here on a tour. They're here with us. We interacted with them as well. The key is you can bait Dennis or any of us into
Charles, that's not my
conversation, and
that's not my intention.
But that's not.
Charles, it's not my intention. It really isn't.
It
really isn't.
But let me finish,
please.
If that's not your intention, we've said numerous times that we're not here for any political aspects. We're not here to talk politics. So outside of that, any questions that come back through that is baiting to get us into politics. Charles, and that's not what we're here for. Charles, every man sitting here understands that.
Yeah, no, he's totally baiting. Chris Cuomo, you absolutely baiting. While I do agree that I think Rodman, should put in a word, totally baiting. So I get that. So I agree with the basketball player Chris on that one. Yes, you're totally baiting Rodman, and that's exactly what I think Chris Cuomo was trying to do. Keep it real. And that's sort of why I feel bad for Rodman. You see, Rodman thinks that he's doing something really great. And he thinks that Kim Jong-un is like this super great guy. Right? And then he actually says, quote, "I love my friend. This is my friend." In regards to Kim Jong-un. You don't hear a lot of people say that. Okay? So why I feel bad for Rodman is because, look, you've got North Korea is really good at doing propaganda, right? And Dennis Rodman's brain is addled from years of substance abuse. It wouldn't take much for masters of propaganda to swing Rodman to saying, "Oh, no, what are you guys talking about? This country's fantastic. I love North Korea. This is the greatest place on earth, I swear. It's not as bad as everybody kept telling me. I love my friend Kim Jong-un. God, he's such a great guy. He got me prostitutes and everything." Literally. That was one of his last trips where he got North Korean prostitutes. Amazing, right? But like I said, I still feel sort of bad for Rodman because he thinks he's doing something good, but he's really not. He's really becoming sort of an unwilling propaganda arm for Kim Jong-un and North Korea. And on top of that, he's a train wreck, so he's a media circus. And that's what Chris Cuomo was trying to do. Chris Cuomo brought him on CNN not to talk about the basketball. Of course not. He was trying to get Rodman pissed off to get ratings, at least in my opinion. While I agree with the substance of what Chris, and I know I said this a bunch of times, while I agree with the substance of what Cuomo was talking about, you can't deny that he was baiting Dennis Rodman into getting pissed off so that everybody would make a controversy about it. And look, it worked. It totally worked. And another thing I wanted to point out, too, is that during this whole thing, man, the guys behind him looked incredibly uncomfortable. Incredibly. Like, the guys around him know Dennis, okay? And so they're like, dude, keep calm, keep calm. And he's like, no. I can handle this. I'm not a shill. I can handle this. No. Oh, Dennis, no. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, man. But he did it. And that's how Rodman became unhinged. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible guy. I'm a terrible person. But I had to do it. I had to do it. All right. Just one more thing, too. This also kind of points at how sad our media is. How sad CNN is. Because, like I said, to pretty much deliberately bring on Dennis Rodman in order to get him mad, which is totally conceivable. I'm not saying for sure that I know. But come on. I think you can kind of tell, right? Rodman's not exactly the most stable person. And I think he's easily manipulated, both by Kim Jong-un and the rest of the media. And God, the guy thinks he's doing good work. He does not know that he is being manipulated. He doesn't. And that's what's really sad. And that's why I feel bad for Dennis. So, all right. I'm out of time. Thank you guys for watching Around the Nation with me, Jeff Waldorf. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to have some great stories. Please make sure to join me then. Please make sure to like and share this video. And if you would, make a stop by our Patreon campaign, patreon.com/TYT Nation. We've got 2 patrons. I want to get 5 by the end of the week. Come on, guys. You got 4 days. 4 days. Every donation, every pledge helps. It helps to build the show. It helps to increase the quality. It actually would help to get rid of some of that lag that we were having earlier today. It would help a ton. And it would keep us free, keep us independent. We don't charge a damn thing for anything. Okay? All of our videos, they're all free on the internet. You can watch it free on YouTube. And, I just need some support. I just need the support to help grow the show into something much, much better and much, much bigger. And, being on the TYT network has really helped. But I need your help now. I need your support so that I only answer to you. And that's who I want to answer to. All right. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Jeff's Politics, and go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/TYT Nation. Tune in tomorrow. Be back with great stories. Till then, have a great night. Goodbye. That's awkward. I believe my mouse just messed up.